What is going on, everyone? Welcome to day 2. Are y'all there? Y'all doing this? Day 2 of the STEM Success Summit. I'm here with the team. How y'all doing? Y'all see us in the corner? All right. So we have a wonderful presentation coming soon with Dr. Karl Reid, as you can see on your screen. But before we bring him on, he is in the building. He's in the building. He's ready to bring value. But before he does, we just want to remind you guys a couple of things about Slack. I have a wonderful team member that's finally made it in, Stephanie.
Hey, so excited to be here. If you want to join our Slack network, the link is bit.ly, so bit.ly/summit Slack. Both S's are capital. So this link will give you the permission, the invite links, so you can enter your email, so you can enter into our Slack network. That's where we're going to have all of our Q&As. You're interacting with all those other speakers, and you'll be getting to hang out with us while we're in this room hyping you guys up.
Yes. And if you don't know, we have a heated debate going on in Slack right now. And there's some money at stake, guys. There is some prize at stake, right? If anybody has a riddle, there's a riddle that we're trying to see who not only has the best answer to, but has the best logic to their answer.
I think it's 7. It's 7.
I don't know. Listen, if you go read it, if you go to Slack right now, again, the bit.ly link, go read it. We've been having a debate. I think the answer is 4 animals are headed to the river. I don't know what Stephanie says. Prashad had like a huge number.
Yeah, I had a huge number, put it down. It's definitely 5.
He says 5. Originally he said 25. I don't think he knows. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and make sure y'all hop in. And just remember that for Dr. Karl Reid, your questions will be in the Slack as well. He's waiting patiently right now. So we're going to go ahead and bring him on. And so without further ado, Karl Reid, Justin, did you want to give a quick introduction?
Oh, yes. Y'all come in and get on the STEM Success camera to do that. So I got one of my own personal role models that I have the pleasure of introducing to you guys. His name is Dr. Karl Reid. He is the executive director of NSBE, also known as the National Society of Black Engineers, a Harvard-educated brother, an MIT-educated brother, and he is absolutely someone who we aspire to be like when we create things like the STEM Success Summit. We're trying to provide access for diverse students, just like Dr. Reid is. He also has a book talking about the idea of working smarter, not just harder. And once again, we have the pleasure. He is here with us in the flesh. We have Dr. Karl Reid.
I appreciate the hype. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all and what you're doing. You are doing something that I think the world needs to follow and appreciate, and that is you're doing virtually what organizations like NSBE and others have done in person for many years, over 40 years. And that suggests then that you can get this to scale, that though at our conferences and conventions, we have 10,000, 11,000, and last convention, 14,000, you probably could reach 140,000 or 600,000 or 1 million people with this platform. So shout out to y'all for all of this effort that you put into it. It's my pleasure to introduce you and to kick off day 2 of the STEM Success Summit, Working Smarter, Not Just Harder, Strategies for Succeeding in College. It is based on a book that I wrote, but based on a series of workshops I used to lead at MIT and other schools and colleges across the country to help prepare students, high school students, for college and help to ensure once they're in college that they're successful. But the principles that I share with you, if you are a STEM professional, still apply as well. If you are in academia and you are teaching young people, these principles apply not only for yourself, but for the young people that you're teaching. And so for the purpose of this day and this presentation, I want to just introduce myself and place myself into this broader picture of STEM and show kind of my path to purpose wasn't rocky. I believe everybody has a purpose. They have to fulfill sort of their calling or their assignment. And I wanted to share with you my path to purpose so that you understand where I'm coming from. And then we're going to delve into this whole notion of working smarter, and not just working harder. I believe that students and professionals, we need to work harder. I think it was Will Smith who says that talent is overrated, that there are a number of actors who are much more talented than him, but one thing he knows, they'll never beat him on work ethic. In fact, he uses the metaphor. He says, I'm willing to die on the treadmill. And so working smarter and working harder really have to go together. We have to work harder, but we also learn how to work smarter. And then I'll just kind of close out with what's worked for me as a professional. You heard a little about my background. And so that's really where I'm going to start. I'm going to start a little about my background. I got master's and bachelor's degrees in material science and engineering from MIT. I went on later, after working in industry for a number of years and working in higher education, to get a doctorate in education. And my research focused on African American males in higher education. They are a dying breed, and I wanted to know why some students were successful and some were not. I got involved with NSBE as a freshman and became a chapter officer running outreach programs in the Boston and Cambridge area, and I loved it, and I became very, very good at it. And that really helped me shape a new trajectory on my career. I knew I wanted to be an engineer and earning an engineering degree, but I really enjoyed being an advocate for young people, speaking for those who can't speak for themselves. And as a result of the success we had at the chapter level, I ran for national chair and became chair of NSBE for 1 year during my senior year into my graduate year as well. And I learned a lot in that process. In addition to that, I went to work for IBM. As you can see, IBM little there in the corner. I was there for 5.5 years. I was a systems engineer. I was a marketing rep. I was a project manager for IBM. And then I left there and worked for a small software company, a German-based company called Software AG. And I was a product and program manager for them. And then after 12 years or so in the industry, I got a call that there was an opening to run outreach programs at MIT. And I took a huge pay cut, went back to MIT, became executive director of the Office of Engineering Outreach Programs to run the MITES program. Some of you might know about MITES, the Minority Introduction to Engineering and Science. And I ran the engineering internship program as well. And while I was there, that's when I went back to school part-time and was promoted thereafter to associate dean and director of the Office of Minority Education. So I stayed at MIT for 10 years, and then I got a call from the United Negro College Fund asking for someone of my background to head up their academic programs. And so I became the chief academic officer for UNCF to support 37 private HBCUs like Tuskegee, like Russ College, like Xavier University in Louisiana, like Johnson C. Smith, building their capacity, but also providing hundreds of millions of dollars in scholarships to students of color. And in that process, we developed a STEM strategy for UNCF that continues today with my good friend, Dr. Chad Womack. And then I got a call 5.5 years ago to come up to work for NSBE, to become the executive director of NSBE. In that process, I did a lot of research on college success factors, diversity and inclusion, some of which I'll share with you momentarily. And then I wrote that book, Working Smarter. I found that the difference between the exceptional student and those who are mediocre, who are not really able to get over the hump, was not about gray matter, was not even about preparation. It really is about how to work smarter, how to be more efficient and effective, more efficacious in how you approach your schoolwork. So I'm gonna share with you the 3 major lessons I've learned in the course of this presentation. And as executive director of NSBE, I had the privilege of leading this, not leading, but supporting this phenomenal organization. So, but basically it was the circle of life, right? I started at NSBE, And now I'm executive director of the very organization that helped me get this to start and find my sense of purpose, my path to purpose. So a quick word about NSBE. NSBE is one of the largest student governed societies based in the United States. It was founded in 1975 by 6 students from the South Side of Chicago who were at Purdue University. And they put out a call in the spring of 1975 to share what they have done, that plus them plus the university had done to turn around an 80% dropout rate among African-American engineering students to a 60% graduation rate by 1975. And so they shared that story with 40 students from 34 colleges and universities. And what was the Society of Black Engineers at Purdue became the National Society of Black Engineers. We're just under 25,000 members. They're still the heart of our organization, our collegiates at 325 chapters around the world. We have 225 NSBE Junior chapter. These are 3rd through 12th graders. And they meet in schools and community centers and churches all around the world. And then over 4,000 professional members who are in citywide chapters or in companies as well. So just a quick thumbnail about NSBE. We have really had a lot of great success as an organization and continue to build on that success led by many of my predecessors. And I have the privilege of serving in this capacity for the last 5 years. So let me just start about this working smarter and starting with my story. So I was born in the Bronx, New York, grew up on Long Island. My father had 2 years of college at Hampton and quit and joined the Navy. My mother never went to college. It was never part of her aspirations or her family's aspirations, but education was preeminent in my family. And so I was able to go to a magnet school, a exam school in high school in Long Island. We moved out to Long Island when I was 3, small town called Roosevelt. You might know Eddie Murphy or Dr. J. It's from my hometown. And I was bused to this magnet school in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, Tresper Clark High School in Westbury, Long Island. And so I graduated top 10% of my class. I had 3 years of electronics, 2 years of computer science. I was well on my way. This is a predominantly white school. Only 80 of us were bused who were Black. And I was sort of well on my way. My brother had also gone to MIT 5 years earlier, so I was familiar with the university. And I had a chance of taking a 7-week course during the summer called Interphase. It was a bridge program and got exposed to calculus and chemistry and physics. Even though I had taken some of those in high school, I had never taken chemistry because of the quirks of my education. At the magnet school, all my science requirements were satisfied with electronics and with computer science. So I never took chemistry. And when in this summer program, I struggled a little bit in chemistry. I was introduced to it for the first time, but ultimately I ended up passing and doing pretty well in chemistry. And that was when I discovered material science and engineering. One of my tutors had suggested I look into it since I really enjoy chemistry. And I ended up changing my mind from computer science to pursue material science. So here I was, freshman year, after having 7 weeks of this summer program, exposed into chemistry, learning chemistry, and the freshman course was physical chemistry, very similar to the topics that I covered during the summer. And I, put in maybe an hour, 2 hours to study. Really wasn't studying. I was just kind of looking over my notes because I felt confident. I had all this success, top 10% of my high school and all of that. And walked into that exam, and yeah, it was a tough exam, but everybody said it was a tough exam until I got my grades back. And I had never seen numbers that low. It was a 38 I got on that exam. And it devastated me because all my life I had been told I was smart. And because I was smart, I got good grades. So I had this circular logic that I was smart, therefore I have good grades. And because I have good grades, I'm smart. And it really began to shape my identity as to who I was. So if that was the case, what did the 38 mean? I didn't even want to go there. And I doubted myself. I doubted my choice. Should I have come to MIT? It was a cold place. It was getting dark. It was New England. It's in the end of October. And I just started to question everything. It just so happens I ran into the professor. And something about me, I'm somewhat of an introvert. And at that time, I was somewhat shy as well. I wasn't the kind of person who spent a lot of time talking to adults, that especially people I respected as like professors. But I ran into him in the hallway. He asked me how I did in the class. Now, just based on the quirk of the grading system, I actually had passed with a 38 because the average was about 53. And so when he asked me, I said, well, I got a 38, but I passed. And he was Professor Witt. I still remember him, the late Professor Witt. He was kind of Austrian and kind of European, and he kind of got into my face like many Europeans do who have a different sense of personal space. And I remember him kind of telling me, you know what, if you don't put in the effort, I'm going to fail you. It was sort of a threat, but it was also an encouragement because he told me the way forward was effort, putting in the effort. And from that point on, I changed the way I approached my schooling. I changed the way I approached my preparing for exams and my preparation for everything. And I ultimately ended up graduating from MIT with both a bachelor's and a master's, a combined 4.6 out of 5.0 GPA, largely because of that pivot, that change in the way I approach it. I actually took up residence in a library almost, except to sleep in my dorm, in order to study and learned how to deep dive learn and learn to understand not just the what, but the why. So what I'm going to do is share with you some of the strategies that I developed over that period. And those strategies helped me get through MIT, but it helped me also to teach to others as well. And so I've mentored a younger number of people. I've advised students. And then when I went to my doctoral program, I sort of learned the theory behind this approach as well that I'll share with you momentarily. So there are three components. The three sensible strategies require you to make three shifts in how you approach your work. And again, your work could be in high school, your work could be in college, even your work could be in the workplace itself. One is attitude. Alexander Aston said beliefs are fundamental. And what he means is, and he's a great researcher, what he means is you really can't change your behavior until you really change your attitude. And so there was an attitude shift. The second were the way that I developed connections. That chance encounter with the professor portended something major that I learned later on, that the students most successful in college are those who had a good quality relationship with their faculty and good quality relationship with their peers. So I'm going to talk about how to facilitate that. And the last is what I call the behavioral shift. It's how to plan your work and work your plan. There are very, very tactical things that you can do to work smarter. Now, most study skills workshops start there. They start just with the behavioral shift. They don't talk about attitude. They don't talk about the connections. They talk about the behavioral shift. I do want to give a shout out to my good friend, Dr. Donna O. Johnson Mackey. Dr. Donna Mackey, she launched the Guaranteed 4.0 system. And I got exposed and introduced to that when I was running the engineering outreach programs at MIT. And so some of the elements in her 4.0 strategy are incorporated into these three shifts. It's just structured a different way than she does. But nevertheless, it complements her work as well, the Guaranteed 4.0. So I'm going to go through this attitude shift first. How do we make an attitude shift? And it really is based on a mindset change. So I shared with you how early on, I was always told that I got good grades because I was a good student. I was a smart student, and I was a smart student, therefore I got good grades. That link between good grades and being smart was hardwired in what she called people who are fixed mindset. In other words, there are people who believe that their intelligence is fixed. They were born with it. they were blessed with it or not, or cursed with it, depending on where they are in the distribution. There's a distribution curve. Some people have it and some people don't. The problem with fixed mindset people is this: they are much more vulnerable to discouragement after failure. They believe that their brains, their intelligence was given to them, and they can't grow their intelligence. They can't become smarter as a result. And so every challenge they experience, like my 38, is an indictment on their intelligence. And unfortunately, a lot of young people give up after they hit that wall, that 38, because they are fixed mindset people. The problem with this group of people is they're always asking themselves, will I look smart or dumb? They're the ones who will ask the question they already know the answer to just so that they can look smart. You know people like that in class. They're the ones who won't take the most challenging major or the most challenging course or sign up to have the most challenging professor, because they're the ones who don't want to get proven that they're not smart. They like to look smart, they like to feel smart, they like to act smart as well. The problem with that as well is they're not going to challenge themselves in what is called the zone of development. They're not going to push themselves to get smarter because they don't believe they can get smarter. The other point of view that Carol Dweck says is there's another group of folks who have a different view about their intelligence, that they can grow their intelligence. She calls those a growth mindset. They have a sort of a malleable view of their intelligence. And actually, this is very supported by neuroscience now. A lot of neuroscientists understand that the brain can be reconfigured based on its exposure, based on its learning. You can actually change the structure of the brain and actually grow cells based on that. It's called neuroplasticity. And so the growth mindset people believe that you can actually become smarter. They're more willing to appear incompetent. They're asked that question in class because the goal of the growth mindset people is not to look smart, but to master the subject matter. And even if it looks bad going in, it's okay. They have a mindset that they're going to get smarter. And so they're going to put themselves out there. And they see challenges as part of the learning process. I liken it to athletes who put themselves in tougher and tougher situations so that they can get stronger, so that they can get faster, so that they can get better at their craft. Why don't we apply that to our intelligence? Why don't we apply that to mathematics? Why don't we apply that to science or to fluid dynamics or thermodynamics or whatever it is? Because we don't believe, a lot of us are fixed mindset. We were told that we're smart and we were born that way. But growth mindsets people are always asking, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? How can I learn this? Growth mindset people don't worry about the intercept. They worry about the slope of the curve. How can I grow and learn from this? So that was the first thing that I had to come to terms with at MIT and in my schoolwork was, hey, I'm not as smart, quote unquote, as all the people in the class. I was the kind of person who couldn't even ask the question in class because I was completely lost. But I knew, like Will Smith, that I was going to die on that treadmill and no one's going to beat me. And so I started to spend hours in that library, making sure I understood everything that was taught to me so that I can go into class, go into exams and knock it dead. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So growth mindset, fixed mindset, I had to change my attitude. The second major shift is a connection shift. It's saying the students who are most successful in college, based on Vincent Tinto's work and my own dissertation, were those who had high quality relationship with their faculty. In other words, good relationships, good connections with faculty, both inside and outside of the class, as well as good connections with their peers. They knew how to get engaged on campus, they participated in campus, and what Vincent Tinto says is those are the students who are most likely to persist in college. And in my research, I wanted to know if that was the case for African-American males, and indeed that was the case. So having faculty members who are perceived by students as being approachable and have high standards and expectations is associated with greater learning. the students who have those great relationships with faculty, who do research with faculty, who connect with faculty in other ways, or go to office hours, they're the ones that have more success. So what I recommend to students is make sure you visit the faculty early. At the beginning of the class, go to him or her, go to his or her office hours, and sit down with them, just spend 15 minutes, introduce yourself. If you're shy like I was, bring a friend and just say, ask the questions, basic questions that I lay out in the book. How do I maximize the learning in this class? What do you want us to get out of this class? Where is this class going? What are the major topics that you'd like us to get? Is there extra work that we could do to understand? Those things have a great, those conversations, those questions will have a great effect on him or her in how he views you in class. And so I really kind of encourage you to meet with faculty and talk to faculty, pursue research opportunities, definitely utilize office hours. That's what Donna O says, and take advantage of board time. What that means is, as you start a class, the professor comes in and often is erasing the board, or at the end of class, they're kind of preparing the board for the next class. If you have a quick clarifying question, use that board time to ask a question. Hey, when you talked about Schrodinger's wave equation, you mentioned this. What did you mean by that? And just get a quick feedback about that. What often happens is they will say, well, I don't have time, but come see me in office hours. And now you have a personal invitation to come. So take advantage of the faculty. Utilize the administrators. One of my heroes and mentors, just as I was introduced as that, is Freeman Herbowski, the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Freeman was the brainchild behind the Meyerhoff Scholars Program, which has been replicated around the country, including some elements of it were replicated at MIT when I was an associate dean. And he often said to his students, hey, if you don't have a B, you need tutoring. And if you don't have an A, you need tutoring, regardless of how strong you think you are. And if you have an A, you should be tutoring others. And that suggests really, again, a growth mindset that says, regardless of what you think about tutorial services, it's not remedial. It's all about mastery. How do you get to mastery? If you need to understand something, go to tutorial services, regardless of how it's viewed. Go to the Writing Center. If you're not getting consistent A's or A pluses in your writing, then go to the Writing Center and ask, what can you do to improve it? Get to know your career services office. I always say, find a mentor. I had great mentors at MIT who kind of picked me up when I was down, but also sponsored me when their scholarships came about and other opportunities for recognition. And the other thing I say to a lot of students, I ask them, a lot of the NSBE members and others, have you met your dean? And it strikes me how few NSBE members really got to sit down with their dean of engineering. Or have you met your president of your university? So what, you got 50,000 students. Have you met the president? Most presidents spend most of their time raising money and raising friends, friend raising and fundraising, and they'd love the opportunity to spend 15 minutes with some students to hear a little about their experiences. You never know when that'll come back to benefit you. So I just say, go up to the president's office, ask for 15 minutes, bring a couple of members of either your NSBE chapter or your dorm or whatever, and say, we'd just like to meet the president and introduce ourselves. What it does is it demystifies your relationship with the university and gets to know you. And somebody who is that influential getting to know you is very, very powerful for your psyche. The third thing is peers. I always say, find your posse and create a pack. The book, The Pack, was from these 3 doctors out of the Newark, New Jersey area who made a commitment when they were in high school that they would support each other into and through medical school, and they did. And when I had a freshman seminar, I used to have my freshmen form a pack. They identify what the terms of the pack were, how they're going to support each other, how they're going to call each other out, how they're going to hold each other accountable if they miss class and things like that. Find your posse. I remember getting an A in thermodynamics and I was so excited about it. I came back to the dorm to some of my friends and said, man, I got an A in thermodynamics. And I actually have friends who were not very happy that I got an A. And you know what? They're no longer my friends. I ended up finding people who were excited about that. So find your posse who get excited about your academic support, your internship opportunities, et cetera. Build relationships outside your identity group. I didn't do this until my senior year. I only joined things that had the word Black in it. Or had chocolate in it. I lived in Chocolate City. I was a Black Student Union, Black Christian Fellowship. Oh yeah, the gospel choir didn't have Black, but we were mostly all Black. But senior year is when I started to reach out and build relationships with the white students and Asian students, et cetera. I really recommend that you build relationships outside of your identity group, whatever that is, and then utilize study groups. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute. And finally, campus engagement. The students who are really successful are those who are really involved to some degree. They join campus committees. So if there's a search committee or a task force that's looking at some policies, get involved, join those campus committees. That's when you meet faculty, that's when you meet the administrator, but you learn the rules of the game as well. And I also kind of recommend you minimize leadership positions, join clubs, but minimize leadership commitments until the end of your sophomore year so that you can go into your junior year. Because until that time, you're learning how to learn at a new level, and leadership positions kind of confound that. I didn't get elected to the chapter executive board of NSBE until the end of my sophomore year, and that's when things took off in my junior year as well. I also want to talk about the study groups. I wasn't a big fan of study groups. This is, again, part of the connection shift. Not a big fan of study groups. I thought they were a waste of time. People just goofed off, talked about the latest party, whatever it is, talked about their relationships. And it wasn't the best use of my time. Until I got into graduate school and I learned how to use study groups and leverage them. And so I've been teaching this ever since. And the research points this out. Yuri Treisman has done a lot of work with the Calculus Honors Workshop, both at UC Berkeley and at UT Austin. Learned a lot about what the literature says. So let me talk about some of the elements. First of all, you don't join a study group just because you're struggling. Back to Freeman Hrabowski, you join a study group to get to mastery, so that you can teach. A master is somebody who can teach others. So if you got a good command of the material, getting an opportunity for you to teach others is brilliant. But so view this as an enabler to excellence rather than it being remedial. Only students who struggle get into a study group. Change your mindset, like I said earlier. Set a day and time. So I kind of recognize that we waste a lot of time if we don't have anything that's sort of open-ended. And so I kind of recommend that you set a date and time, probably 2 days or at least 2 days before an assignment is due. So if assignment is due Wednesday, your study group will meet Monday. And you meet for an hour and a half, say we're getting together from 8 to 9:30. It has a defined end time, so it forces you to be efficient. And putting a day between allows you to get questions that come up in the study group answered before the assignment is due. And so at least 2 days should be that time. Third, I don't recommend more than 4 or 5 members should be in the study group because after you get a large group together, people can hide, people can freeload. They're not doing their work, they're not carrying their own weight. So the accountability is so very important that 4 and 5 can help everybody be accountable. And it really does inspire each other, knowing I can't let my group down. Everyone is held accountable, what I just said, for their part. So what I recommend you do is before you have the study group, you have the assignment, whether it's a problem set, whether it's a paper, or whether it's a preparing for exam, you kind of go through all the problems on your own. Don't necessarily do them, but at least know the approach. How are you going to approach? What strategies, what equations are you going to use? How are you going to derive that equation, et cetera, et cetera. Just make sure you jot down your notes because the purpose of the study group is to validate your approach, not to validate your answer. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Rotate leaders. So you always have a talker. Somebody just likes to talk in a group. So if you rotate leaders, then everybody will get used to the fact that they have to be held accountable to the time, and they won't be sort of talking and going off the tangents. They're talking about the work that has to be done. So everybody should take a responsibility to be the timekeeper and keep everybody on track so that you have shared accountability. If you come to a study group and you're not prepared, let's say you had a crunch week, you had a hard week, we used to call it hell week, or whatever it is, just be honest. Show up and say, listen, I haven't had a chance to look at this problem set this week. I'll be back on it next week. Don't try to hide, be honest and be open. So I alluded to this earlier. An effective study group is a sandwich approach. It's one where you're doing the individual work up front, making sure you understand what the approach is for each problem that you're approaching. Then you'd work on with the group. And in the group, you're just saying, okay, let's look at question one. How should we approach this? Well, and the argument, the process that goes where you're referencing the lectures, you're referencing the text, you're referencing your approach, and you're challenging each other so that you understand, you get to a deeper understanding of the approaches that have to be done. Then you go back and finish the problem set on your own. And make sure you understand it individually. Because here's what happens. When you have a study group, oftentimes you get great grades on your homework, your problem sets, but you get poor exam grades because you don't translate what happens in the group into your individual understanding. The way this works through this sandwich approach, individual work, group work, individual work, not only will you get great grades on your homework, but you'll have great understanding, and that translates into good grades. So attitude shift, mindset, connection shift, making sure you connect with your peers, utilizing study groups, as well as connecting with faculty. And the last area that I'll talk about is what I call the behavior shift. It's how do you plan the work and work the plan. So there are two elements of that I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to wind up. The first is the planning the work and working the plan. I kind of like to talk about this in terms of harnessing time. Some call it time management. You can't really manage time, but you can harness it. You can leverage time. So what I often talk about to students is, in the beginning of the semester, collect all the syllabi that you can get from your class. Everything that you can gather for when all the assignments are due, and when the problem sets are due, when the papers are due, et cetera, and put it on the calendar. When you do that, you'll start to see that there are certain crunch weeks. There are certain weeks that you have 2 exams, you have a paper due, and you could plan accordingly as a result. So you have a broad view of what's happening across the semester. Then on a weekly basis, plan the week. I used to do this on Sunday nights, and I used to break down when I have assignments and write those on a sheet of paper. I didn't have anything electronic at the time, but we all have tools now. But right when the assignments are due that week, so I have a problem set due Tuesday, I have a problem set due Thursday, I have an exam on Friday, and then on a separate sheet of paper, write when I would work on this to prepare the problem sets that's due on Tuesday. So I'm gonna start Sunday night, I'll work on it Monday. On Tuesday, I'll start on that problem set that due Thursday. By Wednesday, I'm preparing for my exam, et cetera, and just plan that week. Then on a daily basis, do the same thing. I'll just say, let me go back to this by week. When I started to teach this seminar to students, they said, Dr. Reid, I wasn't Dr. Reid, Mr. Reid, unfortunately, if you start on Sunday night at my school, it's too late. So they started to plan their week on Thursday night so that they can make sure that they're using their weekends effectively. And so now I'll recommend that you do this weekly planning on Thursday night so that you know how hard to hit the weekend, or how light you can have, how much to relax, so that you're not already behind by Sunday night, which is what often happened to me when I got backed up. By day, doing the same thing, looking at your schedule for the day and making the adjustments. Some things might have taken longer on the day before and you have to bleed into the next day, plan that day. And then I talk about just how do you prepare for exams. So I'm going to switch gears to that. But the students who are most successful in college, again, it's not about gray matter necessarily. It's not about preparation. It's about their ability to plan their work and work the plan. By semester, by week, by day, making sure that you have a plan of action. And it only takes 15 minutes to plan, but that 15 minutes will save you a lot of time and help you become much more efficient. So let me the last part of this is preparing for exams. I told you about my experience at MIT and 1 hour, 2 hours before the exam and just doing a cursory read. There are a couple of things we now know about learning. The more we can involve our brain in encoding, learning new information, the more likely that we can recall that. So if you're just reading something, you're not going to recall as much as if you're reading and writing. And if you're reading and writing, you're not going to recall as much as if you're reading and writing and speaking. So the working smarter approach the deep dive learning approach that I'm going to share with you involves reading and writing, and then creates an opportunity for you to speak it as well, to add to your understanding of the material. So I would started to prepare 2 days before exams, and I would block off maybe 4 or 5 hours before exam. Now, some of you might need less time. Some of you might need more time, but for me, it was 2 days before. If I had an exam on Wednesday, I would start this Monday, right after classes. And I would have a sheet of paper, like a stack of scrap paper, and I would use mechanical pencils. And then I had a notebook as well. And I would just write down everything that I needed to remember or understand. And I still do this today, 30 years later. Everything I needed to understand. And what Donna O. Johnson says, capture those in what she calls the bullet point concepts, right? These in 3 to 5 words, synthesize what you're seeing and understanding. So you're translating what you're reading and what you're seeing into your understanding in 3 to 5 words. Focus in on hard to understand concepts. When you have questions, put a separate part of your notebook and where your questions are, so because you're getting them answered the next day. And then work the problems as they appear in the notes and text in that dedicated notebook. So the reason I like a dedicated notebook, because that notebook will be utilized once you come back to prepare for your finals. So write these things into a dedicated notebook, not just the same notebook that you use in your lecture notes or your recitations, but your dedicated notebook, so that you'll have an opportunity to come back and review this and prepare for finals. And this is key. Make sure you understand the why of every step, every derivation, every equation, every formula. Understand the why, because a good professor, worth his or her weight, will test you on your understanding of why, not the what. When you were in high school, when you were in elementary school, they tested you on the what. Can you regurgitate this? Can you memorize it and regurgitate this? Great engineering professors, great STEM professors, great STEM leaders can test you on the why. So I had to make sure I understood every why of every concept. Why did it go from this step to this step as well? 1 day before, get your questions answered. That's why you start 2 days before. So you go see the TA, you go to office hours, and you get specific questions answered. And gather sample problems. So any kind of problems you have, old problem sets, your problem sets, old exams. And that's when I bring that scrap paper I talked about. Because the day before, the focus is on working problems. You really want to work problems. I recommend you model the test environment. You can't be doing this well and understand deep knowledge and deep work with music playing, with friends playing their music outside or having conversations. What I like to do is model the test environment. So whatever environment you're going to be tested in, model that. So if it's a quiet environment, you should model that, because you really want to condition your body and your mind to be comfortable in that absolute silence. Most people don't live with absolute silence. And then when they sit with an exam for the first time in absolute science, they struggle as a result. So we got to make sure we got to make sure that they do that. Secondly, work the problems. Work the problems. I used to bring stacks and stacks of paper, as I mentioned, and just every problem I worked, every problem I had, I worked that problem. So understand not only the what, but the why for every single problem. What that does is speeds up your cadence and make sure that you can identify the problem, solve the problem, and derive or finish the equation. Do whatever you need to do very, very quickly. And so every problem from recitation and lecture to problem sets, we're working the problems. And then finally, get with your study group. And that's when you test each other and work through or answer any last minute questions. And so you're moving from just reading to writing to now speaking. And that helps you get to mastery in this preparing for exams. That's really what I did at MIT after running into that professor. I started to study the way I share with you, and it turned my whole experience around. And in the Working Smarter and others, I've talked to mentees, they've seen 20-point increases in their exams as well. So attitude shift, growth mindset, developing your confidence, connections, making sure that you connect with faculty and your peers. And then finally, the behavioral shift, your deliberate practice to prepare for exams, learning how to harness time by the semester, by the week, and by the day. And then how do you use class time, making sure you're sitting front and center in that class so that you're engaging with that professor. Even if it's a lecture, you're engaging with your eyes, your body language with him or her as well. So let me just finish up by just saying that success in college is really about the slope. I made the reference earlier. It's not about the intercept. You will always find people who are more prepared or less prepared than you. In my case, in terms of chemistry, mine was at 0. Some people had a lot of chemistry in the background, but utilizing study groups and making sure you're leveraging those study groups is essential. Your mindset, your learning orientation, having the right mindset that says, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? Because my brain is prepared to grow and I can become smarter. Making sure you're organized, you're planning your work and working your plan. The students that separate those who are not successful are those who can't organize. Connecting with your professors, or if you're in industry, connecting with your managers as well. And by the way, this applies in the workforce too. And finally, putting in the extra effort that's required. Be willing to die on that treadmill. Be willing to put in that extra effort, the 3, 4, 5 hours that you need in order to study so that you understand everything. I remember I would not leave that library until I understood everything that was there. And then the last thing I'll just say is I found mentors. I learned how to develop cultural competency. I connected with people who are different from me just so that I can be more comfortable with them and they with me. I made sure I developed my technical and skills proficiency. So when I saw a lack of writing skills, I ended up taking a writing course in college, even though it wasn't required because I knew I needed to write better. And of course, learning how to work harder and smarter, which is what the conversation is. And just get into your mindset, good enough is never, ever good enough. And with that, I really want to thank you for hearing me out. I hope this has been a valuable exercise and webinar. I thank the organizers of the STEM Success Summit for this. And please message me on Slack, as well as Twitter, Instagram, even email. I take pride in reading every single email that's out there. So thank you so much and have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Reid. You killed that. That was excellent. So many gems. We have a bunch of folks in the Slack channel that are really, really engaging with your content. And unfortunately, we're going to have to move into our preparing for our next speaker. But for anyone that's watching this live, and for you, Dr. Reid, if you could join us in the speaker chat thread of the Slack channel, we have a bunch of people that are already asking you questions. And anyone else that has any questions for Dr. Reid, you have a little bit of time, right, to hang around and answer a few questions. So we super appreciate you. Awesome content. You're my role model, Dr. Reid. So please keep doing amazing things. You are really pushing it forward for the rest of us. So we will conclude this session now. And thanks again, Dr. Reid.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, everybody.
All right.